Now for these questions, we need to compare fractions with a different number of decimal places. So which is larger, 0.5 or 0.54? Well, the way we compare decimals is to write out both numbers, one below the other, with the decimal points lined up. Then we write 0 in empty squares, and we start by comparing the larger place values. So both numbers have 0 in the ones, so we move on to the tenths. Both numbers have 5 tenths, but when we compare the hundredths, we can see that this first number has 0 hundredths and the second number has 4. So our larger decimal is 0.54. Now we have 0.7 and 0.56. We write out the numbers with the decimal points lined up, write 0 in empty squares, and start by comparing the larger place values. So both numbers have 0 in the ones, but when we look to the tenths, we can see that 7 is larger than 5, so we know that 0.7 is our larger decimal. It doesn't matter that this second number has 6 hundredths, because hundredths are smaller than tenths. So, because the first number has more tenths, we know that that's the larger decimal. Next, we have 0.8 and 0.91. The decimal points are lined up. We can write a 0 in empty squares. Now both numbers have 0 ones, so we look to the tenths, and we can see that 0.91 is the larger decimal because that has 9 tenths. Then 0.75 and 0.6. The decimal points are lined up. We can write 0 in empty squares. Both numbers have 0 ones, but when we look to the tenths, we can see that 0.75 is the larger decimal. Now we have 7.05 and 7.44, so we can write both numbers out with the decimal points lined up. Both numbers have 7 ones, but when we look to the tenths, we can see that the second number has 4 tenths and the first number has 0. So we don't need to look to the hundredths. We know straight away that 7.44 is the larger decimal because that has more tenths. Next we have 5.72 and 4.73. Remember, we start by comparing the larger place values, and when we compare the ones, we can see that 5 is larger than 4, so we know straight away that 5.72 must be larger than 4.73. Next we have 6.1 and 6.09. The decimal points are lined up. We can write a 0 in this empty square. Both numbers have 6 in the ones, but the first number has 1 tenth and the second number doesn't have any tenths, so 6.1 is larger than 6.09. It doesn't matter that 6.09 has more hundredths, because remember, hundredths are smaller than tenths. We need 10 hundredths to have something which has the same value as 1 tenth. So, because 6.1 has more tenths, we know that that's the larger decimal. Finally, we have 5.79 and 5.9. The decimal points are lined up. We can write 0 in this empty square. Both numbers have 5 ones, but when we compare the tenths, we can see that 5.9 is the larger decimal because that has 9 tenths and 5.79 only has 7 tenths. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that was helpful. If you're a teacher or a parent, then please subscribe or go to keystage2maths.com to download resources for this lesson and many more. That's all for now. I'll see you in the next video.